Hi, this is Angelo Boback, the grumpy old IT guy. That's right, you heard me, the grumpy old IT guy. And welcome to my grumpy podcast, Order by Clause. Now, this is the 8th podcast in the Beginning T-SQL podcast series. And each podcast has a demo or two or maybe more. So pay attention, guys. And by the way, there'll be two other series of podcasts which I hope you'll find useful and helpful. Intermediate T-SQL podcasts where we cover pretty advanced topics like transactions and table locking, and advanced T-SQL topics where we cover even more advanced topics like, pivot queries and advanced windowing functions within T-SQL. Now, after taking all three series, you'll be able to perform basic queries and development tasks associated with a T-SQL developer, or maybe even a SQL Server data architect. And here's just a little grumpy comment. This podcast will only cover the basics. So please look to my fall 2020 Grumpy University for in-depth courses on these topics. But first, well, for those of you who haven't taken any of my other podcasts, you're probably saying, who is this grumpy old IT guy anyway? Well, that would be me. I'm a published author and data architect with over 30 years of experience in BI, data architecture, data warehousing, and data modeling. And before that, I was an electrical engineer, believe it or not. Now, in the last 10 years, I've also participated in several large-scale master data and data quality initiatives, and to support these, I've achieved CIMP certification in master data and data quality. I have to admit, I love the Microsoft BI stack, and I've been using SQL Server for more years I care to mention. Now, does anyone remember SQL Server 2000? Well, I go back earlier than that. And I can just hear some of you grumbling and moaning and saying, boy, this guy's dating himself. Well, that's okay, I am. Oh, and by the way, BI stands for Business Intelligence. And lastly, I hold a master's degree in computer science from New York Polytechnic University and a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering way back when Pratt Institute had an engineering program. I have to say, those were the days. I had a great time, learned a lot, and I met a lot of great people. And I have to admit, I did my share of goofing off. Oh, and by the way, I'm now the founder and president of grumpyolditguy.com. So get ready to learn the grumpy way. Okay, there's more to the order by clause than simply sorting a query result by one or more columns. Now, in this podcast, we'll also cover how to use a case statement in the order by clause for conditional sorting, include row offsets in the result set, like ordering rows that start on a subset of the data, and specifying the number of rows to fetch in the result set. Okay, now we'll also show you how to include parameters for specifying offsets and rows to fetch. So there is indeed more to this than meets the eye. Okay, let's look at a DML query. Here we see our familiar simplified syntax tree for a basic T-SQL query, okay? The order by clause appears last, and it's optional, but it is good practice to specify some type of sort order to your data results. Now we'll see in the next podcast where we discuss the group by clause, how including a order by clause can help make the query results more readable. And we'll also learn how to use a conditional case statement in the order by clause. This is a handy feature because it allows us to sort results based on values of columns. And then we'll learn how to use fetch and offset parameter values. Now, this is a powerful tool as it allows us to create stored procedures that we can pass the parameter values to control what we retrieve. Well, this is how it's done. All right, topic 01, order by vanilla. All right, let's start by looking at a simple example. There you see select asterisks from sales.customer, order by customer ID. All right, that's probably not a good way to do it using the asterisk, all right? It'll work, but
it's preferred to list out the columns that you want, but I guess for examples and development purposes or just doing a rapid query for analysis, it'll work. Now the second format, select customer ID, customer name from sales.customer, and order by one ascending is the preferred way. Well, almost. We have a problem here. All right, we've got order by one, which means order by the first column, which is the customer ID. It's preferable to also call out the customer in the order by clause, or the column I should say, but that's okay. Now, these two examples are really nothing fancy, right? Just select all the columns from the customer table and sort them by the customer ID. Now, both queries are not well written, as I said. So just to recap, using the asterisk to return all columns is not a good idea. Just list the columns you need. And also ordering by one, which implies the first column, is also not a good idea. So just name the column you wish to sort by, or you can sort by more columns. So these two examples that I'm showing here are okay. But ideally, the second example, if you replace the one with the customer ID column, that would be the better way to do it. Let's take a look at another example, all right? Now here's the syntax for the order by clause. Order by, comma, separated column list, and then the keywords ASC for ascending or DEC for descending. Now you can have one column sort ascending and then the second column or the third column in the order by sort descending, all right? So you can include one or more columns to specify how you want the result set to be sorted. You then need to separate each column by a comma. You can specify that the column be sorted in ascending order, again, by including the ASC operator. This is the default, so if you don't specify it, you're going to get a sort in ascending order. Now, if you want to specify that the column be sorted in descending order, then include the descending operator after the order by command. Now, lastly, you can mix and match sort directions. I think I said this already, but it's important that I remind you again. So you can either sort ascending or descending order depending on your needs. Okay, so here we go. Let's just go right ahead, dive right in, and do a demo on what I call the plain vanilla order by. Okay, here comes SQL Server Management Studio. We're going to use a database called Hobby Shop, and it's just a little simulation or an example of a database that could be used by a hobby shop. Has a calendar table and a customer table, has some inventory tables. There you see the product and product type and the inventory schema. Then in the sales schema, we have a calendar table, a customer table and customer address. Then we have something called expensive products in the sales schema, but notice we also have expensive products in the DBO schema, so it's kind of a duplication. And then we have a transaction history and a transaction history backup table, and also transactions and transaction backup. So let's start with a plain vanilla order by clause as seen in the clip. I'm going to select all of the columns by using an asterisk from sales.customer in order by customer ID. So let's just expand on the customer column folder, and it's only two columns, right? Not a lot going there. So let's just do an order by customer ID. All right. And there you have 5 customers. And then we're going to use a different format, but basically we're going to get the same results. Select customer ID and customer name from sales.customer order by 1. All right. Same results. Let's slowly scale down here, scroll down rather, and here's the best choice for the query, where we call out the columns both in the select clause and the order by clause. Select customer ID, customer name from sales.customer, order by customer ID, and we get the same results. Now we're just going to do something a little tricky. I'm going to squeeze in or kind of sneak ahead and look at the group by clause. I'm going to select the distinct customer and relabel it as customer ID. Then I'm going to use a built-in aggregation function called sum. So I'm going to take the total price column as a attribute of this sum function, right? Or as a parameter, I should say, and I'm going to relabel it as total sales. It's going to come from the invoice table. Where's my invoice table? There it is. So I have a whole bunch of columns in the invoice table. And then I'm going to group by the customer ID. In other words, whenever you use this aggregate function, you need a group by clause. It's mandatory. And I'm going to order by the customer ID ascending. All right, so let's execute it. And let's see what we get. And there we see it, C001, total sales are 4,200, and so on and so forth. All right, so this is a pretty neat example. Now notice that the data is sorted by the customer ID. Look at my order by clause. I'm going to order by this same query, but I'm going to order it by that aggregate function in descending order. So let's execute both of these at the same time. So that was powerful. Let's just take a look at these results a little bit closer. So notice the results. In the first query, our total sales are 4,200. But in the next query, the total sales are the highest one, 28,250. And then the results are in descending order of the value amount. So this is a pretty advanced way of sorting already. And let's see what else we have here. Oh, let's look at that inventory product table, see what products we have. We're picking all of the columns, I believe. Let me expand on the product table, if I can find it. There it is in the inventory schema. So I'm going to look at pretty much all of the columns here, I believe. Well, actually, no, I'm looking at only 4 of them. I didn't include the wholesale price. But let's just execute this query. And we're sorting it by the first column, the product ID. And there it is, all the products, 1, 2 through 10. And as you can see, this is supposed to simulate a hobby shop that sells model trains, N-gauge electric trains and Z-gauge, and there's that product type in the retail price column. Now we can do the same query, but this time we'll sort it by not only product ID, but by product type. So we get all of the product types appearing first. Products 1, 2, and 3 are product type 2, and then 4, 5, and 6 are product type 4, and so on and so forth. So you can see now how you can pretty much order by more than one column. Here's another way of doing it. I can only order by product type. Again, probably it would be better if I spelled out the product type column name instead of using the positional value, the third column in the select clause. But it works the same. Now I'm going to sort by 1 and 2, which product ID and product name. Let's see what that gives us. All right, so you see that we get N-gauge electric trains and Z-gauge electric locomotives, rather, and HO gauge electric locomotives, and then the pattern repeats itself, right? I didn't come up with too much of a detailed example, but it's good enough for our purposes. And here's a whole bunch of other ones. We'll now order by the columns in the product table, by all the columns in the select clause, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do that. All right, so there it is. It's supposedly sorted by all those values. The primary one being, of course, the product ID, then the product name, the product types, and then the retail prices. So you see that for each little group there of product types, you have the retail prices in ascending order. Now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to sort by product ID and product name and retail price in descending order. Okay. Now let's look at this. Now they're not all by descending order. They're by if you don't specify the ASC or DESC, the product ID will sort in ascending order, and so will the product name. Now watch what happens though if I just stick this DESC here, and let's just swap it out. Let's put this in ascending order, and let's see what happens if there's any differences here. So now I have the product IDs in descending order. I have the product names in default ascending order. All right, and then the retail price is also in ascending order. And let's see, how many more of these do we have? Just one more. Let's just order by the product, let's say by the retail price. We're going to order by product type and retail price. All right, so let's execute again the same query. So now you see the retail prices are in descending order, but the pattern is broken by product type. All right, so each time the product type changes, all right, then the order of the retail prices starts again in descending order. So that's what I mean by groupings of data. Okay, so this is how you do a plain vanilla order by clause. Well, here's our second topic, order by with case. Now sometimes you need to specify sort orders depending on values in the columns, all right? You can do this by using a conditional case statement, just like the ones used in the select clause. Now the basic syntax is the order by keywords, then case, then the column name, and then the conditions. When column value 1, then the column you want to sort by. When column value n, then the column you want to sort by, else for the default the column value. So that's very generic. So be careful though, if you don't use correct data types and conversions, the results might be unexpected. All right, so here's a highlight of the data in the example. Notice how the results sorted by the column failures per year for failure year equals 2018 do not look right. Now we'll see how to fix this in our demo, but let's get back to this query first. So I'm selecting, let's see, 5 columns. This is supposed to, by the way, mimic the failures for different equipment like valves in a power plant. And I'm pulling them out of a table variable because this is just a test query, if you will. And the table variable is called plant valve failure. So the order by clause says when the failure year is 2017, sort by valve location. Now valve location happens to be a character string. Else, convert to varchar the failures per year, which is a number, to a varchar and sort by that. But look at failures per year. They started sorting okay, 12, 13, 14, 15, 20. Then all of a sudden we went to 3 and 50. Well, that's because there's no 0 in front of 3, right? So it just took the number, converted it to a varchar, and it didn't sort it correctly. But notice the sort condition for failure year 2017, all right? The valve location is text, so it's sorted correctly, all right? But I know this is probably confusing, so the best way to really understand this is by, you guessed it, let's do another demo, order by with case. Okay, let's bring up SQL Server Management Studio. I set it up here with 2 query panels, and we're going to use a plant equipment scenario for this particular order by with case predicate. So let me go through and kind of set the stage here. So I've got a table variable, declare ampersand plant value failure, and I'm declaring it as a table. You know, recall when you created variables or declared them, they'd be like declared ampersand, some variable name, and then integer or varchar 26 or whatever. But in this case, the data type is a table. And then just like a table, between parentheses, we list all the columns, the data types, and the null or not null indicators. So I've got a plant column, varchar 128, then the valve, varchar 128, and valve location, varchar 128, and then the failures per year, small integer, and the failure year of varchar 4. All right, so let's look at the data, just a couple of rows. So I'm going to insert into this plant valve failure, plant A, valve type 1, location A, 5 failures per year, and the year was 2017, and then so on and so forth. So let me copy and paste the first example. And I've got the first example here commented out. Okay, so let's paste it. Now remember that when I have a table variable, I have to always include that declaration and then the loading each time I rerun the query in question, because the table variable is only in scope within the scope of the query. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually execute each example here so that I don't have to keep scrolling up and down. I'll scroll a little bit, but not much. So let's scroll down here, and I'm going to select those columns, the plant, the valve, all the columns in the plant valve failure table variable. I'm going to order by with a simple case statement. Now, when the failure year, case failure year is 2017, then I'm going to sort by that valve location, which is a variable character string. Otherwise, I'll just sort by failures per year. So let's just execute everything. So conversion failed when converting the varchar value to location A. Okay, so right off the bat, I get an error. All right, I'm just trying to sort a small integer as if it was a varchar. That's not going to work. So let me sort down a little bit more. And I've got another query here that's commented. And the comment is, this sort of works, but failures per year is a small integer. So if the value is greater than 10, it'll sort okay, but less than 10, not so much. So let's cut and paste this guy. And let's replace this faulty query that will not work. Get rid of the comments. And execute it. And so actually, before we executed, look what I did. I did a slight modification to the order by clause. Case failure year when 2017, then sort by valve location. Else, convert failures per year to a varchar. Should work. And let me stick a little go in here. I'm fussy. I'm an old grumpy IT guy. I like to be precise. So there's that batch terminator. I'll execute it. So this time it sorted. Okay, let's take a look at these results. Okay, so when the failure year is 2017, I'm sorting by valve location. So look at all the way at the bottom there at row 10 on. Location A, B, C, D, etc. That's sorted fine. But let's look at the case where the failure year is 2018. Failures per year is what we're going to sort by. And I got 12, 12, 13, so far so good, 14, 15, 20, boom. And there's that 3, okay? It broke the sort sequence and then it tried to recover and there's a 50. All right, 2 attempts. The first one didn't work. The second worked sort of. And this final one, this should fix it. All right. Let's copy and paste this little guy here. Paste him here. Let's take a look at the order by. Get a little bit more complex. Excuse me. Now we've got nested case statements. So I'll start off by ordering by case failure year. When 2017, then valve location. Okay, check. That's good. Else, another case statement. Case when failures per year is greater than or equal to 10, then simply convert failures per year to a varchar. Else, tap on a 0 there, concatenate a 0 in front of that failures per year. So values from 0 to 9 will get a 0 in front of it. 0, 1, 0, 2, etc. So let's execute this and see how it works. Let's look at the results. Okay, so now it looks pretty good. Failures per year for 2018, 03, 09, 12, 13, 14, 15, 20, and 50. So that looks good. And then for 2017, we sorted by location, the valve location, location A, B, C, etc. So that worked out well. So that's it. So there's how you do an order by with case statements. Okay, topic 03. Let's take a look at row offset and rows to fetch feature. Now in our example, we specify a row offset of 2, which means start retrieving rows after the second row, including the second row, and we specify to fetch the next 8 rows only, so that's all we get. We get rows 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 10. Now we could use the top 10 keywords in the select clause to get the same results, but we have the option to specify the scenario in the order by clause. So if we specify top 10, and we specified an offset value of 2, we would get rows 2 through 12 in our result set. But then we would have to specify fetch next 10. So it's really not a good idea to mix and match here. You don't want to do select, the top X rows, or specify the offset and the fetch next, right? It's a little bit more precise. So this is just another neat feature to use when analyzing data, right? If you have a table with, 100 million rows, and there's an issue between row 110,000 and row 140,000, well, you could specify the offset and, what you need to fetch. So let's dive right in. Let's do a demo on this new feature here. Actually, it's new for us, but it's not new to Microsoft SQL Server. All right, and let's take a look. Okay, let's bring up our friend SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, same kind of scenario here. I got 2 query panels. Same plant valve failure table variable, right? Loading it up with those rows, so we don't have to worry about it. All right, let's scroll down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify an offset of 0 and fetch next 10 rows. All right, so this is probably going to work the same way as a select top 10. So let's execute it. And there they are, the first 10 rows. What did we sort by? We just did a order by the plant key, the valve location, and that's it. We didn't worry about those conditional case statements like we did before. Let's try another query now. Let's select plant key, plant valve again from there, and just sort by valve location, right? Just to compare the two. Nah, I don't think we want to do that. It's really not relevant. I'm just going to take it out of here. And what we're going to do is we're now going to, actually, I take it back. I am going to execute this query in this window. And, ouch, I need to comment this query out here, right? Because I didn't include the declaration. See what happens? So I'm going to comment this out. So table variables are good to use, but they can become cumbersome. I'm going to execute this plain query here, so bear with me. So there's the results. Okay, just a plain old select a bunch of columns from the table variable in order by the plant key. So I'm getting rows 1 through 10. Now I'm going to take this query here, I'm going to cut and paste it, or copy and paste it. I always say cut and paste. All right, just copy and paste it and execute it. So I am ordering by plant key, and I'm specifying an offset of 2, and a fetch next 8 rows, all right? So now you can compare these two queries. Actually, it would have been better if I would have said top 10. Let's re-execute this. Oh, I did it again. All right. Let me execute the whole batch. Okay, so we get an error. The top 10 cannot be used in a same query or subquery as an offset. Okay, why? Because I did the wrong query. All right, I don't need it here. I need it here. All right, little correction here. I think I need some caffeine. Let me review it again. I'm going to just do a plain vanilla select a bunch of columns from a table variable and order it by plant key and valve location. Just highlight everything. So now I get the top 10 rows. That's what I wanted to do. And here I just have that query that has the offset of 2 and the 8 rows, fetch next 8 rows. So you can compare the two. See, I started on row 3. So when you specify an offset of 2, it skips the first 2 rows, starts at 3 and goes all the way to 10. And here in the left panel, I just have the top 10. So you can see the difference, right? So now I think it should be fairly obvious how this little offset and fetch next works. All right, let's forge ahead and see how we can use parameters. Okay, topic 04, order by with parameters. So instead of hard coding the start row and the offset, we can use parameters. So in this clip, we're just declaring 2 variables. Okay, we're declaring an ampersand start row as a small integer, and we're declaring ampersand num rows as a small integer. So set the variables to the desired values. In this case, we're saying start rows 10 and the number of rows 100. And then just use them in the order by clause, okay? Order by failure year ascending, offset ampersand start row, and fetch next ampersand num rows only. So make sure to use the correct data types, and you can use integers instead of small int in case you're working with larger volumes of data. So here we go again. Let's just do another demo so we can see how we can use parameters. Okay, SQL Server Management Studio is up. So we're adding 2 variables here, ampersand start row and ampersand num rows as small integers. And we're setting it to start row at 4 and num rows at 7. So I've copied and pasted the table variable declaration there and the insert statement to load it up with some rows. And I'm going to execute this first query. So notice that the query is pretty much like the others, except now I'm using these parameters to dictate the offset and the fetch next, the number of rows. Okay, so it's pretty simple. Again, select all those columns. I've included a plant key, which, by the way, just let me scroll back up here for a minute. In the declaration, I've added a identity column, plant key integer identity. So it'll automatically create those 1, 2s, 3s, 4s for the identity column. All right, so let's just execute this, right? There they are. So I specified what? I've specified a start row of 4. All right, so it's actually going to skip that row 4. It's going to start at 5. So probably a better variable name would have been something like offset. I mean, I can go in here, highlight it, and do an edit. Let me see here, find and replace, quick replace, start row with just offset. How's that? That's pretty much the right way of doing it. I should probably do it here also, but I'll do it later. So let me just get rid of this. So now if I execute the query, there it is. It's a lot clearer. An offset of 4, I start at plant key 5, and if you add 7, 5 and 7 is 11. So that's the rows I get. All right. So now let me do something a little bit that we're not going to cover yet. I'm going to talk about stored procedures in my intermediate podcasts. I am going to drag the hobby shop name here, make sure I'm in the hobby shop database, which I am. Let me see. Actually, I don't want to go into the hobby shop database. No, I don't. I want to go into the plant equipment database, because this time, instead of creating a table variable, I'm actually going to create a table called plant valve failure. So let me expand on plant equipment, look at the tables, and do I have a table called plant valve failure? No, I don't. So I'm going to create this table. It has the same columns as the table variables we've been using. All right, so let me just create this table, refresh that table folder. All right, where is it? Plant valve failure there. It's in proper case, so it kind of stands out from the other tables, which I did in uppercase. I'm going to insert those same rows, right? I don't have to describe this insert statement. And let's just take a look at these. All right. There they are, so all the data is there. So now I'm going to create a stored procedure. What is a stored procedure? Well, just think of it as a little program that you can execute over and over, and you can pass parameters to it. So creating a stored procedure is pretty simple, a simple one anyway. You just use the keywords create procedure, then give it a name. In this case, the name I've given it is USP underscore, order by with parameters. Pretty obvious what it's going to do. Now I prefixed it with USP because that's a pretty much accepted standard in the world of SQL Server. It stands for user stored procedure, so it differentiates it from system stored procedures, which I think just begin with SP. So I'm going to create this procedure USP underscore order by with parameters. It's going to take 2 parameters, ampersand start row, a small integer, and ampersand num rows, a small integer. Now what I can do is I can do a global, and watch out when you do this, it's dangerous, a global edit, quick replace, ampersand start row with ampersand offset, just to make it clearer. All right, 10 items got updated, so hopefully I did it correct. So I'm going to pass it the offset and the num rows in the procedure, and then I'm just going to stick that query we've been working with, select all those columns from the plant valve failure table. I'll order it by failure year in ascending order, and the offset is going to be the offset parameter, right, that I passed in the store procedure, the keyword row, and then fetch next ampersand number of rows, num rows, rows only. All right, so let's just create this stored procedure. Okay, it's created. Where did it go? Well, if we look at programmability under stored procedures, there it is, DBO, default schema, USP underscore order by with parameters. I probably should have created a schema called, I don't know, procedures or something of that sort, and then all the stored procedures would go in that schema. But we'll keep it simple. So all we need to do now is basically test it out. So I got a little batch script here. Okay, I'm going to declare those 2 variables, ampersand offset and ampersand num rows. Both are small integers. So let's just line everything up here. I'm going to set the offset equals to 4 and set number of rows equals to 7. So let me clean all this up here. We don't need all this here. And I'll just take them one at a time. Copy and paste. All right, so I'm going to now execute that stored procedure. Put a little go here. And I got that little underline there. Usually indicates an error, but it worked. So now the query, look at that. The stored procedure rather executed the query internally with the supplied parameters, and it gave me the results. So now let me just change the offset and the number of rows. I'll go in here and just paste them. Execute it again. So now I get a whole different set of values. So I think you can see the power of this. You can have this stored procedure now. You can have a SQL Server Reporting Services report call this stored procedure. And when you design the report, there's mechanisms that will allow the user to basically fill in the offset and the number of rows. So think of the power now. The user can basically do a lot of analysis and control how many rows are returned by this query. All right, so I think that's it. That's all of our demos. I'll drop the table plant valve failure. All right, so that should be gone. Tidy everything up. Always save everything. And let's wrap things up. So that wraps it up. I hope you found it interesting and enjoyable. And I think you can agree that the order by clause is not as simple as it first appeared to be. So in this podcast, we covered basically how to sort by using the order by clause in ascending or descending order. Then we learned how to use the case statement in the order by clause. We also learned how to use nested case statements, and we included row offsets in the result set, like order rows that start on a subset of the data. Then we also learned how to specify the number of rows to fetch in the result set. And finally, we learned about parameters. We learned how to include parameters for specifying offsets and rows to fetch. Now, when these features are combined with the group by clause, for example, we can create some rather powerful and neat reports. So we're going to look at our tool podcasts, but our next podcast is going to be the group by clause. All right, so let's just look at the tools that are available. Okay, so here's a list of my podcasts for the category of SQL Server tools. And I strongly urge that you take a look at these in case you haven't seen them. Now, starting off with podcast T01, there's installing SQL Server 2019. So this shows you how to download, install, and configure SQL Server 2019. You need this if you're going to learn how to code T-SQL. That's all that there is to it. And then there's podcast T02, which shows you how to download and install SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio. Now I got a 2019 in there because it works with SQL Server 2019 and also earlier versions, but it's really version 18. They're calling it version 18. When you install it, you'll see it in your Windows folder. But anyway, you definitely need to take a look at that and get that tool. Then there's podcast T03, installing Data Tools 2019. So this is an add-on to Visual Studio that will allow you to create basically SQL Server related projects in Visual Studio. And if you don't have Visual Studio, well, podcast T04 is for you. Installing Visual Studio 2019 Community. That's the free version. So take a look at that. Then there's podcast T05, installing reporting services. So this is the web-based reporting architecture that works with SQL Server, right? It's a very important part of a SQL Server BI stack data warehouse. So definitely take a look at this podcast. Then there's in podcast T06, downloading and installing Report Builder. So this is going to be the GUI design tool that you're going to use to create web-based reports that you'll publish to reporting services. And then finally, there's podcast T07, installing Power BI. Now, Power BI is another advanced scorecard and dashboard design tool that will allow you to really create very sophisticated and powerful analytical reports. All right, so this is another serious and important component for your for any data warehouse project, I should say, that's based on the Microsoft SQL Server BI stack. All right, so let's wrap things up and look at the other podcasts that are in this series.
Okay, that's it. So I hope you enjoyed it. And here's a list of my available podcasts for the category of T-SQL Basics. So this is my introductory series of podcasts. Recall I'm going to have some intermediate podcasts and an advanced podcasts. But in this series, we have Podcast 01, Navigating SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio. So this is the tool we've been using all along. So if you haven't taken that and you're a little fuzzy on how to use Management Studio, SQL Server Management Studio, go back and take a look at this podcast. Then podcasts 2, 3, and 4 take you through creating and managing databases, tables, and views. And what I mean by managing is you can alter these data objects once they're created. So very high level again. And then podcast 05, T-SQL DML, all right, data manipulation language. And I hope you took that. That's really important. It shows you how to query tables, but not only that, but how to insert, update, and delete data in tables. Then podcasts 06 and 07, string and date functions, showed you how to use these important functions in your queries. And then podcast 08, that's what we did just now, the order by clause. And finally, podcast 09, the group by clause. And this shows you how to define groups from the data that's returned from a query. Now, what do I mean by a group? Let's say your manager or one of your business users comes up to you and says, "Hey, I want a report that shows sales by customer, by product type, and sales date." Well, that's a grouping of data. So once you define a group like that, then you can do all sorts of calculations on the sales data. Like you can sum it up. You can find the minimum and maximum of the sales. So definitely take a look at this next podcast. All right, so see you. And here's a little grumpy alert. Again, the next podcast is the group by clause. And yes, a little applause, a grumpy reminder, and some shameless advertising. Please be on the lookout this fall for my Grumpy University at grumpyolditguy.com for a buffet of T-SQL courses to enhance your skills. And then I mentioned it's a savory buffet. All right, that's enough of that. See you in the next podcast.